As a starting point, I thought I would search for objects already created online. So on the website thingiverse.com, I found this mug handle for converting an arrow mouth into a mug of some kind with a handle. I thought, why reinvent the wheel? We could begin by just remixing something already available. So I would do that by maybe chopping off this handle. Okay, using the rectangular prism hole, I'm going to Control G or hit this group button to cut that. Unfortunately, I put this piece on the printer and found that it was a little large, by no means a snug fit. So I could have tried experimenting with some resizing, taking some exact measurements perhaps, to figure out exactly how much smaller it needed to be. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to try making some threads. I'd run across this shape generator in Tinkercad before, so I thought maybe instead I would try producing some threads for 3D printing myself. So I'm just going to start by bringing this shape in. We can see it's going to need to be much larger. So I began with a caliper measuring the cylinder that the threads protrude from on the mason jar. I found that diameter to be about 67.5 millimeters. I want to make sure I'm not going to be too tight. So this is going to be the inner radius of my threads. And the outer radius, I use the caliper again to measure the outer radius of the actual threads on the jar, and I found that to be 71 millimeters, giving myself a little extra, 1 extra millimeter for clearance. So that outer radius, if it's a 71 millimeter diameter, that's going to be 33.5 millimeters. And my inner radius at a 67.5 millimeter diameter, that's going to be 33.75 flat. So my inner radius should be the smaller of the two, 33.75. And the outer radius, 35.5. I always like to maximize the number of sides on a new cylinder because, as you see at the extreme, this is sort of a polygon. If I want a smooth circle, I need to maximize the number of sides. Okay, I know that I want a hole cut in the cylinder that is going to be 71 millimeters, the exact same as the outer diameter of the threads. So I could begin by turning the cylinder into a hole and making that 71 millimeters by 71 millimeters. I determined that I want a height of my actual piece to be 16 millimeters tall. And now to create the solid ring, I just have to determine how thick I want this wall to be. If the hole is 71 millimeters, if I want the wall to be 3 millimeters thick, I'm going to add 6 millimeters to 71 millimeters, making this 77 by 77 millimeters. Okay, now we should be able to grab these two objects, use our L for align tool, see the shortcut L, and center them up. Okay, I'm going to Control G, group those, center them with my threads, using the L for align tool. Okay, things are coming out pretty nicely thus far. To see some of the other options here, I'm going to need to tab down. You see, I should have the option to change the direction of the threads from clockwise to counterclockwise. I find that feature is not working. So, and I did originally print this and find that the threads were backwards and needed to be reversed. So what I found the way to reverse those, I'm going to hold down the Alt key to make a copy of those threads. Hold Alt and drag. You can also use classic Control V, Control C, Control V. I need to pull this through to get them turning the other direction. Now, I know that I affected the height there, but that's okay because I want to measure that anyway. So to find that 6 millimeters from the bottom of one thread to the bottom of the next, I'm going to drop in a block for reference and change that to 6 millimeters. I'll take a parallel projection. Just make sure. Okay, so this is only halfway around here. So it's this thread that needs to come down to 6 millimeters right here. Note if I want to get more precise, I can change my snap grid to a smaller snap. Now I can move that right down to 6 millimeters. Okay, let's grab the cylinder and the threads, use our alignment tool to center those up again. See what things are looking like. All right, finding these threads working extremely well. The only thing left to do is to create the bracket portion of this project. I'll go ahead and use the same block that I had been using earlier. Set the height to equal 16 millimeters to match our ring. I'm going to place a ruler. It's already been placed. Just on a couple of major grid lines. Now, when I select any one of these shapes, it's going to show me the shape in reference to the ruler. So this little toggle here allows me to scroll between using the midpoint and using an endpoint. That's going to be really handy. With the circle, I do want to use the midpoint. I can change that. Note I see my diameter here, but this is the distance from the midpoint, which I'm going to change to 0. Here we're 6 millimeters from the midpoint. I'll change this dimension to 0. And that should center our circle on the ruler. There we are. Okay, now I can grab the rectangle as well, and I'm just going to note the dimensions of the rectangle right now. So I want this rectangle to be 77 millimeters wide here to match the circle. Okay, I also want that to be 0 so that we're centered with the circle. Now, in top view, I know that the distance, I took a measurement of the widest part of the jar, and I want that to rest right on the wall. So I want the widest part of the jar to be equal to the back of this rectangle, which is going to also be against the wall. Measuring that with the caliper, we got 96.85. Okay, this negative 89 to me needs to be negative 48.425. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. So what I need to do now is go ahead and split Control-Shift-G or ungroup some of these items. And I'm going to take the threads and hide them because I need to ungroup, Control-Shift-G, this hole again, so that we can now group all three of these items together, Control-G, to get that bracket. Now if I go back to Show All, we have our threads again. Okay, from here I just have to decide how I want this to mount to a wall. I think we should make sure and Control-G, group those threads. We can close out our ruler, probably get away just using our alignment tool at this point. Might even be able to snap on that corner just visually. Decide visually again If we want to make this a centimeter, perhaps 12 millimeters. Be pretty comfortable with the visual, but we also can confirm this is 77 millimeters wide. We can make this the same, which it already is. Just to double check, align that to make sure it's exactly right. We may be able to align these two endpoints as well. Okay, we'll decide how tall we want our bracket to be here. So I've measured the diameter of the screw that I want to use for mounting this to the wall. I think I'm just going to go with one screw. Again, increasing the sides to the maximum. The screw was 4.17 millimeters in diameter. I might try a 5 millimeter clearance hole, but I'm tempted to go as large as 6. Okay. I believe that I have my ruler centered up pretty well, but while I'm here, I'm going to group these two parts. Okay, and make sure that they are centered. If I use a midpoint here, I'll zero that up on the ruler, and then also center this cylinder. I can probably close my ruler now. I'm going to lie this cylinder down flat, 90 degrees. Okay. Lift it up, perhaps just visually. I can move that over. I think that I'm going to be okay with just visually placing that, maybe a little higher. Okay, make sure it's protruding all the way through. Okay, I can Control All, Control A, Control G, and that hole is in place. And now I'm considering as a final touch to put in a couple of gussets here. So I actually don't recall the height of this piece. I'm going to guess it's 37. Not sure how we landed at that, but I will stick with it. Okay. All right, let's try that alignment again. L for align, to the end, and the end. Right, I can hold the Alt key to make a copy of that piece. Maybe group these first. Align again. Control All, Control G. And that piece looks ready to go on the printer.